Welcome to Shift. Today, Ward Brehm is our guest. Ward is a humanitarian, an entrepreneur, and somebody that we need to listen to, I think, for insight into our culture today. And so, Ward, thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me. Nice to be back.
10 years ago, you were given 10 years to live. Tell us about that.
Well, it's a long story, but it started out with I was diagnosed with a rare form of blood cancer called polycythemia vera, and at the Mayo Clinic, and then subsequently was diagnosed as a type 1 diabetic, and a few years later prostate cancer, followed by a diagnosis of chronic lymphomic leukemia. So I'm a wonder child. I have all my medical care now at the University of Minnesota, and it was interesting because 10 years ago I was talking with my hematologist, and I asked him, kind of Old West style, give it to me straight, doc, how long do I have to live? And he said, well, that's the most ridiculous question I've ever heard. I'm not God. You could get hit by a car tomorrow. And I said, yeah, but if I had a gun pointed at your dog's head, give me an over/under, what would it be? And he said 10 years. And I started thinking about that, and that actually said, 10 years. I was 60 years old. 10 years, that sounds pretty good. Less than that, really, and more than that, a bonus. But then I got thinking a little bit more about it, and I said, what if I knew? God never tells us when we're going to die, but what if he made an exception? And he told me, no, this is 10 years. You're going to die in 10 years. Would that change my life? And the answer was kind of obviously yes. And then the next question I asked myself was, how would it change? And so I actually sat down with a pad and pencil and I started writing out a 10-year plan. If I knew for a fact I only had 10 years to live, what would I do? And I wrote this very eloquent, it was almost 10 pages of document. And my mentor, Doug Coe in Washington, D.C., I told him about both the diagnosis and my plan, and he said, you need to come out right away. So I flew to Washington, and I met with him, and he asked if I brought my plan with me, and of course, I'm so proud of it, and I pulled it out, and he tore it to pieces. Just ripped it up, didn't he? He said, that's a 10-year plan. You need a 10-year plan like a hole in the head. What you really need is a 3-day plan. If you had 3 days left to live, how would you spend those 3 days? And then do that for the rest of your life. And that proved to be really good advice. And I thought to myself, if I had 3 days to live, what would I do? Number one was I would leave my company. I started 2 companies, I'd sold one. I would leave the company for sure. The second is I would get my children and family around me. I'd have a captive audience. I only have 3 days left, and teach them everything that I know. And so I actually implemented that, and that was really the purpose for my writing that book, was putting to paper the things that I felt were really important. And I left my company a week later. I just said, well, I'm gonna stick to my plan. And so it's been interesting because it's been 10 years. And I feel great. And I really need that disclaimer, is that I've got wonderful medical care, and I've negotiated with my hematologist now that my 10 years is up, and he gave me a fresh 10. So now I'm good to go till 80. So I'm happy about that.
I think a lot of us, maybe I'm talking about myself, I might decide, you know what, I'm not really going to die in 10 years. I think I'll just keep doing what I'm doing. I feel safe working, I know working, you know, I'll be extra nice to my kids. I'll call my brothers more. But I think I'm just gonna just kind of forget about it because it's too painful. You know, ugh.
Yeah. Well, join the club because we're all in denial. Actually, I laugh because that's one of the gifts. I'm not in denial. But a lot of people are, and I'll never forget, I was having lunch with my friend and mentor, Wheelock Whitney, and it was his 85th birthday, and he said, before we start this lunch, I got something really serious to tell you. And I said, well, what? And he said, I've got a terminal disease. And my face just went blank. I mean, it was my best friend, my mentor. I reached over, grabbed both his hands, and I said, oh my gosh, Wheelock, you know, what is it? And this little classic Wheelock smile, and he said, I'm 85. Silence. So you tell me, you know, how many summers at Promise Hill do I have left? 5? I'd be 90, 10, 95. He goes, how many Christmases do you have left? And I looked at him, he said, yeah, he said, I wish I had a picture of your expression. But see, it's unlimited. You have an unlimited number of, you've never even asked yourself how many Christmases I have left because time is infinite, but it's not. And that really helped, you know, put into perspective for me the fact that we are all going to die. Nobody's getting out of here alive. You know, one of my best friends is common, you know, always says that. And I love the Woody Allen line. I share it. Is that I'm not afraid to die. I just don't want to be there when it happens.
So how do you live?
You know, I had a big decision to make, and I think we all have this decision to make when faced with a problem, or faced with a crisis, or faced with our own mortality or sickness, or those of the people that we love. Is the natural reaction, I think, the natural human reaction is to be resentful. Is to be resentful for the help or the things or the circumstance that we don't have. And what I found in my own case is that natural instinct towards resentment or rationalization or justification, it leads to a really bad place. It leads to a very dark place. It's this idea of self-pity. It actually feels very good because you're venting but you're
feeding yourself and trying to build yourself.
And poor me and but it leads to a very toxic place spiritually, not only for me but the people around me. And so you say, well, what's the antidote? What's the alternative? And the alternative is gratitude. The alternative, and sometimes I have to take it in both hands and wrench it, is to get off the resentment for what I don't have and back on to being grateful for all that I do have. And I was at a De Montreville, this silent retreat, and an old priest started us off with a challenge to go back to our little rooms and write down a list of 50 things that we have to be thankful for. He said it can't be less. You can't come out of your room until you have at least 50. It could be more, but it can't be less. Number 2, don't worry about the order, because you'll get to number 15 and you'll think of your mom, and then you'll go, oh gosh, I got to start all over. So no priority, just 50 things that you're grateful for, and bring it back. And so I did, and we did, and he said, now look at your list and realize that you have the most powerful antidepressant known to mankind in your hands right now. And it is so true. You know, the old on the nursery room wall, count your blessings. I mean, it really is true. I can't get into that list more than 10 or 15 items until I'm feeling, my heart is I'm grateful. Thank you. Including this day. Everything's a gift. And it's been extraordinarily helpful as a reminder to me of how many blessings, how many gifts. What a wonderful, spectacular life I've been able to live, and that beats it. Having said that, I have a little pity party for myself once in a while, but I limit it to 15 minutes. That's it. And then it feels good. I enjoy every minute of it. Then it's over. And
is anyone invited to your party?
no, nobody can come. Nobody, believe me, nobody would like to.
So we find ourselves going into a year of the pandemic, and incredible change, probably inside ourselves and certainly in the world around us. How have you looked at this, and is there opportunity for us to be grateful?
I think there's always opportunity to be grateful. Sometimes you have to dig a little deeper. I think we're all, I think I can speak for actually the entire world, that we're all really tired. We've all grown very, very weary. Having said that, unlike the popular icon, we're not all in the same boat. We're all in the same storm, but way different boats. The people that we've been working with in Africa are floating around in a hurricane in a leaky canoe, while I'm stranded on a luxurious ocean liner. So what for me is in reality an inconvenience is a tragedy, mortality for a lot of people, and tragedy and unbelievable hardship. And so there are blessings. I think that we've all made adjustments to our life. I was shocked. I'd actually challenged you and everybody watching this. I don't know what made me do it, but I actually looked back on my calendar that I keep, electronic calendar, to 2 years ago, and I almost got sick to my stomach looking at how busy I was. I'm looking at a calendar that and do it. Just go back 2 years. You can just click. Go back pre-COVID, and I think that we were all, at least speaking for myself, living a rat race. I mean, it was, it gave me a headache even thinking about it. You know, my wife said, "What took you so long?" It gave me a headache while you were doing it. But I think a lot of us have come to the realization that there are certain parts of this isolation, there are certain parts of this lessons from this epidemic that we're going to be able to apply to our lives going forward, and also to treasure the relationships that we have that now often are reduced to a Zoom meeting, and to treasure the amount of time that we have left with both ourselves and those that we love. It just makes it that much more precious. And so I think that everyone in their own way, when you really look at this and you say, when it's over, are there any? I think there are going to be all sorts of hidden blessings and lessons and adaptations that we make for the better. Although let's get rid of it. Don't, sooner the better.
Yeah, right. It's so easy to get very busy for some people, and you almost, this was like a shock. And a friend of mine said, maybe God's giving us a reset. And we're literally unplugged just like you would to restart a machine. And so what are we going to do when we get plugged in again? And that's kind of what you're talking about is, being very intentional. And I don't know how you've done it. I think I would be crumbled if I were told not only that I just had 10 years, but that I had to deal with type 1 diabetes, that I had 2 blood diseases, and cancer. So,
Well, again, it's really, I laugh because the fact of the
Yes.
matter is, despite of all those things, I can't tell you how many people say, gosh, Ward, you just look great. When I do see people, and I feel great and everything's wonderful. So, that is actually a natural occurrence. I think the bigger question, though, is this idea of busyness is a badge of courage, right? So, if you, a few years ago, I did it as a kind of an experiment, but people, hey Ward, how are you doing? Great. Yes, how are you doing? Great. Blah blah blah.
Yeah.
And so, are you busy? And I go, no. Really? Is business? I said, no, not.
like,
Not
what do you
busy,
do?
but
then?
everything's going
Yeah.
great. And they didn't know what to say because the answer is, I'm busy. I'm so busy, which really is saying I'm so important. I'm valuable. I'm so engaged. I'm so relevant. I'm so all of these things that we don't admit to ourselves. But our platform becomes one of busyness or of business or of even humanitarian work. That's where I gain my identity. That's where I can put on this, as Brennan Manning calls the imposter, the false self, and present myself as a important, relevant, but I know better.
That's how I feed my ego.
Right, and that I think goes on. I think one of the advantages of this COVID is we all need to we're taking assessment, we're taking inventory, and you're saying, gosh, you take some of these things away, and I feel kind of empty. And I see that so often in the people that we're serving among the extreme poor in Africa, where I've come to understand it, but people seeing it for the first time, where they're seeing people with nothing. They're seeing people living in miserable conditions. I mean, conditions that aren't fit for a barnyard animal, and yet they are filled with a sense of contentment and happiness is not the right word because it's condescending. They're leading incredibly difficult lives, but they are filled with a sense of community. They're filled with a sense of purpose, strength, courage, all of these things that emerge in that crisis. And so this COVID, to the friends in Africa, and I'm not being complacent, or it doesn't really matter. And they're saying, well, first of all, the only people that are, it hasn't hit Africa as it has much of the world because the population's so young. So a lot of people have COVID, but they're not showing any symptoms. And the people who are getting sick and are dying are old. And they get sick and they die anyway from malaria or a handful of diseases. So it really is, I think that we can gain a lot of perspective out of this mess and just say, and quickly, I mean, this idea of, oh gosh, poor me, I don't get to see my family the way I used to. Oh, isn't that boo-hoo? So I'm learning slowly to bust myself, give me a hit across the head, because there is so much that all of us have to be thankful for.
So in all of this, where do you think God is leading you?
Oh gosh, that's really a great question. And I wish I knew. I wish he'd just speak up. Just tell me. Just let me know. Give me a hint. Give me a sign. Give me something. And what I've come to realize is that and this is sobering, is that God really doesn't need me. I mean, I'm laughing, so are you. I always thought God really needed me, right? And the fact of the matter is that God doesn't need anybody. He's God. He can do anything that he wants, and he does, and he acts with absolute impunity. I can be helpful, and if he puts a calling on my heart, I can either ignore it or I can follow it. But that really isn't what he's after. What I realized is that God doesn't really care what I can do for him, because obviously he could do it himself. What he really wants is for me to love him. I've got a little grandchild. We're so excited. We get him for 5 days. And he's been home wandering around, and I don't keep track of all the good things that he does or all the bad things that he does. All I know is that when he comes up to me with those little arms stretched out with that little smile and wants to and let me hold him, I think that is what God has always wanted, really, from all of us.
And we hope that that, is a picture that we have when we go to heaven.
Well, that's a good point. I think our generation in America is the first generation ever to think that we can have heaven on earth. And it's pretty close. I mean, what do we lack?
True.
I mean,
yes.
really. So you're saying, people, that's the question I'm asked more than any other by my friends in Africa is, why do you pray? And when I'm a little offended by that, they explain you've got everything. If we had what you had, it would be like we went to heaven. We don't have to worry about going hungry. We don't have to worry about our kids. I mean, your kids are all going to college. You got like more than one car. I mean, are you kidding? So I think that we really and I think that feeds into this denial, right? And so I deserve these things. I've earned these things. And that's a ludicrous argument. I mean, this is mine. I
worked so hard to get
Come
here.
on, give me a break. How did you figure out? How were you born in Orono, Minnesota?
Yeah.
Back that one up, right? As opposed to a village under militia attack in eastern Congo. How did you swing that one? And so this idea along those lines of heaven, I've got my business partner for many, many years, Jeff Bird, one of the founders of Hope Academy, the inner city school. The other day, we were talking and he said, I realized that we're running out of time. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, we're running out of time to suffer. And I said, well, I'm not following you. He said, well, think about it. We only have this life to be able to sacrifice anything for God. This is the only shot we got, because once we die, we're going to be in heaven. There'll be no more suffering. There'll be no more pain. There'll be no more opportunity to serve. This is it. So we better get busy. I thought that was a great, very good perspective.
It is. It really is. And am I sort of doing my part? Or am I just being comfortable?
And we're all, this idea of comfortable, we're not comfortable. The more comfortable we get, the more assets we have, the more money we have. I mean, there's zero correlation. We all know that.
Yeah.
And so I don't think we're comfortable. I think we're pretending that we're comfortable. I think we're pretending it's this imposture that everything's okay and I don't have to do anything, and I'm just going to really just protect what I have. The rich young ruler, Jesus didn't tell everybody to give all their money away. He told that one person to give that money away. And I've often thought about that, is that we think we think that we got this wall of security, that we don't deserve to get cancer, we don't deserve to die, we don't deserve to be in a car accident, because we've got all this security, which is just a complete facade. And so I think this COVID is kind of lowering that a little bit too, where we're really all forced to grapple a lot more. We can't just go through the motions anymore because there's not that much motion.
Well, we're vulnerable. I mean,
Right.
we've sort of been exposed. And I know I work hard to keep my homeostasis. Okay, this is kind of how I protect myself, and I have my routines and rituals. And, I'm in my home, my son is there, I feel good about that, but I go outside, I open up myself more, but I do my usual routine, and I'm not exposed to things, right?
Yeah.
So maybe that's one of the lessons that we can glean from listening to you, Ward, is that, sometimes stepping outside yourself and exploring and just opening up to new opportunities opens yourself up to more people and the work of God.
Mm-hmm. Well, and to God's purpose in this.
Yeah.
What's God's what potential purpose? I don't believe that God causes these problems. I don't think that Jesus. He never said that if we followed him that we wouldn't have trouble. In fact, he said the opposite. He said, in this world you will have trouble. He guaranteed it. As a follower of Christ, you're going to have trouble, and arguably more than anyone else. What he promises is that he would be with us in that trouble, and alongside us with that trouble. And you say, well, why have trouble at all? Well, in heaven there won't be. But the reason is because trouble instills in us a sense of need, and God wants us to need him. God wants us to depend on him. God doesn't want us to be independent. God doesn't want us to be these, strong Marlboro men and women that go about, I got this, right? We don't have it. We never have had it. We just think we do.
Well, I am so grateful that you came and really told us about yourself. And I am so sorry that you have, had the diagnoses and the timeline, but you have given us the benefit of what you've learned.
Well, actually, I'm the beneficiary, and I'll tell you why. Is the idea that I have these lingering, everything's indolent with me. So I feel fine. I've got the best doctors in the world. Everything's going great. My hematologist dealt me a brand new 10 years. So on that front, that is the privilege of your problem. That's the blessing. That really is a blessing. I'm on notice. And so when my wife Chris was diagnosed with terminal cancer and given a month to live, that was 11 years ago. And God performed a miracle at Mayo Clinic, and it's been 11 years, and as she said, I'm living in overtime. There's a bonus.
Now you both are.
Now we're both in overtime. So if somebody gives you a bonus, what's your reaction? Thankfulness.
Thank you.
Right?
Thank
It's
you.
not sadness, it's not gloom, it's none of those things. And so I'm 70 years old. I realize that we're all in this river, and we're all going to the river up over the waterfalls. I can hear the waterfalls a little more clearly than. But I'm 70 years old. Come on. So it's been a wonderful run, and it still is. And
It still is.
Got a second grandchild, and I got to go back to my list of 50 and make it 100.
And let's all do that. Let's all challenge ourselves to
Make
be
the
grateful.
list. Make the list.
Make the list of 50. The priest says you cannot come out until you do your list. And want to also say next week we have criminal defense attorney Joe Friedberg joining us to talk about the Derek Chauvin trial, what to expect, It will be televised. Why does he defend criminals? Lots of, I think, interesting information from this colorful guest.